So the first question that we like to start as many of these with as we can is if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. I have you guys in a specific list. So for this first question, I'll just go down the list that I have, and you guys can introduce yourself. So starting off with Ian, you want to start off and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Ian Warner. Actually graduated out of University of Kansas with a architectural studies degree. That's kind of a lower tier degree, but that was all the way back in 1999, and dual majored in business. Got that in 2000, and then a master's in architectural management in 2001, all from University of Kansas. And then worked in the trades and in construction, and went straight into construction management, and worked for a large general contractor out here, actually based out of Kansas City. So J.E. Dunn, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with those folks. Worked out here for them for about 11, 12 years, and then ended up building a new headquarters for Trimble Technology out here in Westminster, Colorado. And so I was the on-site technology manager for that project, and liked it so much, I just stayed in the office I helped build, and I've been with them ever since. So a little over 7 years now, and help out with educational outreach, universities, unions, trade schools, do some product management, still dabble in some construction management as well. So hopefully I can give you guys a little bit of good advice on some internships and other options out there.
Awesome. Next up, I have Nicole, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Nicole Mader. Some of you look familiar. I'm around KU all the time and helped to teach a class this past spring, which was super interesting to do online with Kent Sprecklemeyer. I graduated from KU with an MArch 1 in 2014. Then I went on to Columbia University in New York, got another degree. Right now I'm actually doing an MBA online, which is something you guys might be interested in through it's Quantic University. Now they recently changed the name, but it's a free MBA program. So I'd recommend looking into that if you have any interest. I am an architect. I'm a licensed architect. I primarily design sports facilities, entertainment facilities, venues. Right now I'm working on a healthcare project, which is atypical, but given the state of things, I tend to bounce around. I'm based in the Kansas City office, but I've worked with our London office quite a bit. Post-Columbia, I was on the East Coast for a while, so I have some connections out there if people are interested in trying to move to new areas. And mainly, I'm always down to help KU people with anything you need, so feel free to buzz me.
Awesome. And the next one we have is Daniel, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for having me today. My name is Daniel Mai. I work with LS3P. A little bit about my background is I got my master's in architecture as well as my bachelor's of architecture from the Savannah College of Art and Design in Georgia. I practiced out in Colorado for a bit doing hospitality, high-end residential and urban design projects, and then also practiced in the DC area with Smith Group. After that, I pretty much went into the trade industry a little bit, specifically spray foam installation, where I got to cut my teeth with sales and take a deep dive into all the chemical makeup of spray foam. So that was a lot of fun. Learn a lot about residential energy savings and getting to educate clients on the benefits of that. And then from there, I ended up I went back to SCAD and helped with recruitment, marketing, and business development. So I sort of took an alternative career path from architecture, but it really played into all the other sort of areas that make you a successful professional. So anyways, after several years of doing that and building relationships with companies as well as recruiting faculty, I jumped back into the architecture world, so where I am currently for the past couple of years now with LS3P. So I do pretty much their recruiting for all 8 offices throughout the Southeast. So we do have 3 offices in North Carolina, 4 in South Carolina, and 1 in Georgia. So I'm actually based out of the Savannah, Georgia location, but supporting all 8 offices in university recruitment as well as professional recruitment as well. And then doing a whole bunch of community outreach as well. And during this time, it's it is a really great place to be in terms of shifting the lens and really helping all demographics across the industry. So happy to be here to chat with you all today.
Awesome. And our final panelist, Vinny, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Vinny Hun. I'm with BRR Architecture. I actually graduated from KU in May in 2020, so my list is going to be a little shorter than everybody else's. I've been with BRR for about 3 months now, and so I've kind of been through the process that you all have, applying during Corona and everything, so just here to give a little insight on that.
Awesome. Great to see such a diverse background we have here to give on this topic. So just to clarify with everyone, this is going to be talking about interview and internship. All of the questions I'm going to be asking are submitted from students, and students have written them. And I'm going to be going first with more about interview process and interviews section, and then feeding into more of internship questions. So starting off with our very first question, what steps should we take to prepare for an interview? That's something that is kind of the first thing we have to think of. If anyone has something right off the bat they thought of, feel free to go, or we can go in an order.
I think that just the most important thing is knowing people. So if you have an interview at a company and you don't already have a contact there, try and work your network and figure out how you can draw a connection to somebody that works at that company. Because in my experience, usually that's the only way you can get that position, unless you just have, really, really stellar portfolio and you're a really good fit for the company. It will really benefit you to create that direct line of connection between you and a person that works there so that they can speak up for you.
I think that's awesome feedback. Just to piggyback off of that, I would absolutely research the firm that you would like to interview with. So definitely getting your foot in the door with connecting with someone there or finding a mutual contact. LinkedIn is amazing for that. Also, make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date as well. And then aside from that, definitely research that it's the type of firm that you would want to work for. I think, obviously right now there's kind of a shortage of positions, but it's a great way to start the conversation and making sure that you make the right selection for your career.
Oh, another point. Don't ask about pay in the first interaction because that's very awkward. Don't ask about any HR issues in the first interaction. Ask them questions about what it would be like to work there, what your responsibilities would be. Explain to them how you can add value to the company, but don't come in and say, what are you going to pay me?
For my prep, I created prep sheets, so I kind of threw on an elevator speech that I had, kind of just a quick 10-minute spiel that I could explain to people about myself, what I'm about and stuff like that. I also kind of thought about questions. I think a lot of places do kind of ask some sort of generic questions like conflict in the workplace or some other questions along those lines. And I tried to think about those beforehand and kind of came with my own stories. And I always felt like that kind of helps me out, that I'm not trying to come up with something on the fly, that I have something somewhat prepared.
I'd also say try to stand out a little bit, with your groups or your work experience or your hobbies or anything like that. Been through the hiring process quite a bit here at Trimble, and we're getting mountains of resumes, and so any little tidbits in there that'll kind of oh, I can relate to that. They're a drone pilot, or they worked in Habitat for Humanity over last summer, or they've been residential experience, or just anything you can think of that it may seem trivial that you don't really want to put it on a resume and kind of add too many line items on there, but maybe you can just add that in the last little section of hobbies or interests or something like that, and make that personal connection either to HR or the folks that are actually doing the hiring at that point.
Yeah, I can add to that. I put at the end of my resume that I was into aquariums. And the person interviewing me called me the aquarium guy and proceeded to email me about aquariums. So just something to make you a lasting impression.
Awesome. Great way to start off. So the next question we have is, you can answer it from either the perspective of the interviewer or the interviewee, but what is the first thing you noticed when going into an interview? And we can go ahead and start with Daniel on this one. If you like.
Sure. So the first thing that I noticed going, I guess I'll go from both, I guess. For coming in as the interviewer, I guess I typically look for sort of the experience that I have, and this is kind of speaking to pre-pandemic times, and just kind of looking at the experience, looking at the interactions between people when I first walk in the door, how welcoming they are, if they notice that you're there, and then just from there on, just what your interactions are like up until the point that you meet with the hiring manager. From the other side of the table, as the interviewer, I kind of try to look for, is the interviewer here on time? Or did they show up a little bit early? I've seen both extremes, but generally early is good. And then I try to look for, how they're presenting themselves and, how prepared they look. And I always I know this is kind of old school, but I always think about the handshake as well when I first meet them. I think that's important in the eye contact and sort of those soft skills or cues that is a good tell for a person's character.
Anyone?
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said too. I think as an interviewee, one of the things you can do to help yourself stand out is just be incredibly kind and gracious to every person that you meet whenever you step into the building or even outside the building, because you never know who's ultimately making decisions in interviews. And just be really humble and gracious. And it's difficult to walk that line between being humble and explaining your skills. And you might feel that you are, far and above your peers, for example, but saying that in a tactful way is important. And when I'm interviewing people, I'm always listening for the statements that the interviewee to make include what value they're going to bring to the company, because it's easy for people to come in and say, I'm just, young and hungry and willing to learn. It's like, yeah, everybody says that, but what are you going to bring to our company that we don't currently have? And if you can kind of cut the BS and get down to that level of information really quickly and come in really strong and confident and explain to them what you're bringing to the team, I think that will really set you apart.
I totally agree with that. And just to feed off of that some more is this comes back into my previous comment about researching the firm that you're interviewing. If there's a specific sector that you're very interested in or a specific project, and that's even more impressive, to kind of take a deeper dive and try to connect that with some of the work that you've been doing in school or some of the research that you've been doing. That really makes a great impression to the interview committee and shows your level of interest in what they do and how you can be a part of it.
Sure. I'd say the only thing I could add on to that would be make sure you don't say that there's something you don't want to do. Especially, I know this is, if we're talking about internships, right, you're automatically going to do the things that nobody else wants to do. And that's why they're hiring the interns in the first place. So it's a great experience to do those things because you see the repetition, you see, some things where you can actually improve efficiencies and, maybe use a technology or find some other way to do that better. So don't be afraid to just say, yeah, I'm willing to do whatever it takes and start at the ground level. Obviously, the way you're dressed, COVID's going to change a little bit of everything, but If you're doing online interviews, make sure you show up early. I would try to log in at least 15 to 10 minutes early, because there's always issues on whatever web format you're using nowadays. So be early and don't be upset if they're late. I know at Trimble we send people through a gauntlet of folks for interviews, even on internships. I mean, they end up going through 6 to 10 people sometimes, and if there's a VP or whoever, they're always running late on their meetings, and so you may end up being 10 to 15 to 20 minutes past your allotted time. But please don't take it personal, and maybe it's a test, but most likely it's just that their meetings are running super late and they're trying to get in there.
For me, I was in Studio 804 with all the Corona happening, so it was a little bit more tough for me. I was, on a construction site literally 10 hours a day. So just know that people are willing to work with you. I would encourage getting dressed and getting ready for your interview, but I was doing phone interviews in my car in my Carhartt jacket and a beanie, so people will work with you the best they can, but come prepared if you can too.
A tip for being dressed appropriately: for anyone with long hair, pull your hair back away from your face. This goes for in-person interviews and video, but that way you're not playing with your hair or moving your hair. That kind of signals a timid nature, it seems like, and be aware of, especially if you're on camera, if you have a full up the nose view or any other awkward view, just be really conscious of how you're presenting yourself.
At BR, they encourage us to really center yourself on the camera, use backgrounds the best that you can, pretty much get as much focus on you as possible. If we're leaning towards more heavy Zoom meetings and stuff like that nowadays.
Awesome. Great way to start off the interview process. Now we're going to dive a little bit more into the interview itself. Through interview process, what are some of the more common questions that you either give or you have received in the interview process that students can kind of prepare for before the interview process and kind of think about a little bit more? And we can start off with anyone who's ready.
I'd say be ready to answer some weird questions, because we tend to ask questions to gauge your creativity levels. If you were a candy bar, what type of candy bar would you be? Or if you had a superpower, what would that be? And I think the key to preparing for those questions, because they're changing all the time, is to practice answering some weird questions with your family or friends, and don't take a long time to think about it is the key. No one cares what candy bar you say you are. It's about just coming out and being I'm a Snickers bar immediately, and then post-rationalizing why you said the first thing that came to your mind, or at least that's my take on it. We ask things too, what is your skill levels in certain programs, and I personally don't care what your skill levels are in certain programs, because we can always train people to be better, and there's a certain level of expectation of what you're learning in school that everybody's got about the same level of skill, but just be prepared to answer those questions and say I'm most comfortable in X program, or I most frequently use this program, but I also use these other things. And I think that's a way of saying it. It's not I'm a level 8 out of 10, because nobody knows what that means. There's always more you can learn in certain programs. That covers it roughly. Yeah.
So I guess I'll jump in. I think a lot of the questions that we like to ask, or at least I like to ask during interviews, is usually centralizes around collaboration, team dynamics, and just sort of learning processes. So I typically ask, how do you like to learn? I think coming in, especially at the internship level, entry level, or even at our project architect level, I think there's certain assumptions that are already made once you made it to the interview, and we could see that, hopefully you already know how to use Revit. Hopefully you've worked or been on a couple projects at that point, so you have a basic understanding of how a construction set comes together or production set comes together. So some of those are assumptions that there. Of course, we'll continue to assess those, but for me, I'm more interested in learning how can we help you as a firm grow as an architect or interior designer or planner. And then the other piece is what kind of role or dynamic would you bring to a team? Are you just a natural leader? Are you more of a researcher? Are you strictly a production person? To each his own. But having an understanding of having responses to that ahead of time and where you thrive the most, and try to be honest with yourself on it too, and what role you would like to play on the project, I think is important.
That's perfect. That's one of the most frequent questions I ask is, why do you want to work here? I think that kind of goes back to Daniel and Nicole on researching the firm that you're going into, right? Like, why this firm in particular? Do you know somebody? Is there a history? Is there projects? Or, why this firm specifically? And then the other one is, where are you going to be in 5 years? If we hire you, where do you see yourself at the company in 5 years? Those are two standard questions that always get asked in the interviews. And so your answer should be, if you want to work there, it should be a position in that firm, and it's not just a stepping stone to another firm, or I want to start my own architectural company, right? Even if you do, it's probably not the best way to lead into your interview.
To piggyback on that too, if I have to ask an interviewee why they want to work or why they want that position at this firm, that means they didn't already express that value to me, and I give them negative marks for me having to pull the answers out. I want you to lead the interview and tell me who you are and what you're going to bring to the team. I don't want to have to ask you for that. I mean, that's why we're all there, right?
I can agree to all of this. Just applying to jobs, I had around 30 interviews in the past 6 months. But yeah, all these questions apply 100%.
Awesome. So the next one, which Nicole talked briefly about, but I think we I want to loop back around to it, is what questions should or what is allowed for an interviewee to ask in an interview? I know we briefly talked about wage and HR and everything like that, but a lot of times it does come around to, okay, what questions do you have for us? And what would you like students to be asking in that process? Or what would you recommend? You can start with anyone.
Sure. Go ahead, Vinny.
I think it's definitely knowing your company. I did, a lot of research like Nicole and them said, but a lot of my questions were around, what's the company like? Where is it going? Where is it growing? And I usually got some positive feedback from a lot of that. So I think those questions are always some good ones to ask, just to show that you have a lot more interest in the company.
I always appreciate.
Go ahead. You're fine.
I always appreciate the culture questions. The ones that I like to answer, like how do you build camaraderie and build a studio culture in your offices, and then another one is how do you support professional development for your employees. I think those are kind of two really great questions that I typically hear.
I would encourage you to ask questions throughout the interview and don't wait for the end when they say, and do you have any questions? It usually has a really awkward shift in the conversation. The whole interview, your goal should be to make the conversation be as comfortable and natural as possible, because they're looking for people that they're going to sit next to every day and they don't want it to be awkward. So I would know ahead of time a few questions that you might have about that particular firm. Definitely don't use boilerplate questions that you would ask of any firm. It should be really tailored to that specific firm. I would shy away from asking any questions about equity in design. I personally think equity in design is incredibly important, but this is all about trying to make that conversation as comfortable as possible. So don't ask them, do you have any women in leadership? If I was in a room of men and I asked that question, they might feel really uncomfortable. Or if you ask, do you have equity is equity in design a priority, or do you provide training or anything along those lines? It's not going to go well in your favor, I don't think, unless that's a really important part of that firm's culture. So I would just encourage you to think about who you're interviewing with, especially if you can research that person ahead of time. Learn about some of the things that they're interested in or working on, or the market that they represent, and think about how you can put everybody at ease with these questions. Because the questions are, one, they're your opportunity to learn more about the company, which is good, but hopefully you're already using your networking and channels and online information and anything else you can find to get answers to those more tricky questions or less socially acceptable questions. And then the questions that you ask in the interview are just further proof of how you're going to add value to their team by being a good teammate and being thoughtful and having good conversations and not being awkward. So that's all really important to keep in mind.
Sure. I'd say one other question you may want to ask, depending on the size of the firm, is if they have any structured mentoring programs, or if they have anybody in mind that would be your mentor. I think that's a huge, especially if you're going in there for an internship or you're just starting out in your career, if you can find somebody that's willing to take you under their wing, or if they have a formalized mentor program, it will really speed up your career tremendously. I mean, if you have to sit there and fight and try to find, what the best resource is for anything at that company, that whole process takes 1 year to 2 years to become good at your job and know who the right person is to contact. And you can really short cycle that, down to 3 to 6 months if you have the right mentor in place, and they can point you in the right directions and save you a lot of headaches trying to find all that information on your own.
Awesome. So great to get through the interview process. Some tips there, but looking towards after the interview. What tips do you have for individuals, or what steps should individuals take once they leave the interview? I know there's different practices around, but feel free to give your suggestion.
Go ahead.
Follow-up emails are always important to me. I know I always had sent one directly a day after every single interview I'd have. I would also follow up maybe another week or two afterwards as well. But I always thought that was helpful and always gave a lasting impression too.
I would say to know who the point person is to follow up with afterward. Like at my firm, you might interview with a group of 6 or 7 people, and it would be difficult to keep in touch with all of those people. You might not get all of their full names, so make sure that you know who the one person is. In my firm, it's the HR person to keep in contact with. And then phone calls or Zoom meetings or in-person meetings are always better than an email. If you have the opportunity to call that person and follow up the next day, that's going to be much better and more memorable than an email. Emails, I get like over 100 emails a day. So sometimes I just, it slips my mind or whatever. I think calling is much more important.
And to piggyback off of that, I always appreciate a handwritten letter.
Yeah.
So those candidates usually stick out because now you're disconnecting from the screen and you're reading a nice tactile. And I know I'm in a cohort of designers right now, so you always appreciate that sort of tactile feeling of paper and pen. And it goes a long way. And generally we have really good handwriting, so that's good too.
I think they covered it. I'm good.
All right, awesome. So we're going to go ahead, and the final question with regards to interviews is a little bit more topical to the current environment, and it's a little bit more general as well. Do you have any immediate tips for online or phone interviews? I know we've sprinkled a few in there, but a little bit more direct. Is there an immediate thing you would recommend?
So I have, instead of like a paper portfolio, I have a website, and it's password protected because I work on some confidential stuff, but it's really easy for me to keep up with it because anytime I do something that's like kind of cool that I think I could feature in an interview, I just drop it on the website. And then a couple days before I do any interview, I send them the website, I send them the password. I usually actually duplicate the page and I make the password the firm name. So like right now I work for HOK, the password would be HOK. And then when I'm in the interview, I can just scroll down to the section that's applicable to that firm or that position, and we can have a conversation about that, and they'll see other things that they might want to talk about. I think figuring out how you would choreograph an interview when it's all completely on the screen and allowing people to, like, it's the equivalent of flipping through a book, but it's on the screen and it's not just like you sharing your screen, right? So that there's more options there and more opportunity for organic conversation to happen.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Online portfolio sites are great. Just make sure they work. Make sure the link is good, and you can test it out with a friend beforehand. It's just really important. I love the idea of creating a narrative as you're kind of going through discussing your design process or maybe some of the projects in your portfolio. Again, just make sure that it's working, just because there's always technical difficulties. In terms of, I guess, speaking to phone interviews, again, kind of the same responses as before from all of us is just think about those responses, how you can really show your character or show your personality through those responses. I always like, especially with, and you can go off of the boilerplate kind of questions. I think those are usually asked. We try to take a deeper dive, but having 2 or 3 examples for each of the general ones, like the about me's questions that I really don't like to ask, but they come up pretty often. Or even, can you tell us about a time about conflict resolution, or what kind of strengths do you bring? Always have. I think that's one of the benefits of having just a voice or phone call interview, is that go ahead and have those notes. I mean, you'll have those notes for maybe in person as well, but it's a great kind of first step or initial interview or interaction that you can have, so that you don't have to worry about the screen per se. You're just kind of relaying the information. So that might be a good practice to have going into those interviews.
Sure, definitely agree on having the links, because I know the resumes I picked up, if they had links in there, I'll click on there before we actually get to the interview, and that gives a lot of good questions for the interviewer, and then you're already memorable at that point too as well. So I think that's highly important. Backgrounds, I've seen some folks not have a clean room on their Zoom call. So either have some type of other background readily available, or position your camera just right so that it's not facing the window, but you've got a good background on the wall, or borrow some other location if you need to. If you're placing the master, you've got noisy dogs or noisy roommates or whatever else in the background. Just try to eliminate any of those little distractions that will mess you up off your game when you're trying to answer those questions as well.
Yep, I got nothing. I think they covered all of it.
Awesome. All right. We're going to go ahead and transition a little bit more into the internship process. And the first question we have is, what are some tips you would recommend for entry-level architecture students, so first or second years, trying to land their first internship? and trying to get that first position?
So when I was in that level of schooling, it was 2008, and there were no jobs. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels between then and now. I know our firm has a complete hiring freeze. We can't hire anybody, not even interns. And I actually didn't have an internship until my fourth year summer. Because study abroad was required. I probably could have gotten one in my third year summer, but I studied abroad. And I guess just want to let you guys know everything is going to be okay if you don't have an internship every summer. It's good to get experience, but it's really not going to make or break you. I worked at a whole bunch of other kinds of companies while I was going through school. I probably did every role you can do in a restaurant. I worked retail. I did a whole bunch of stuff, and that all contributed to my skill set and those soft skills and professional abilities that I have now.
I would say the number one thing I hear for all architects is go build something. If you're going to do an internship in your freshman, sophomore, junior year, go build something. No one will ever fault you for that, and it'll make a huge difference on your details and the way you interact with builders and kind of the way you think about how things get designed. So that would be my advice. Even if there's no internships available, go build a tough shed in your backyard for your parents. Like literally, it'll make a huge difference in just how you understand the concepts, how things come together and the parts and pieces, and how you need to break that down to the least common denominator for people to understand out in the field.
For me, I couldn't quite get an internship, I think, my second year. So what I did in lieu of that was I learned more programs. I kind of dived into Revit, AutoCAD. I learned a lot of Rhino, a lot more. So, if the internship isn't an option for you, do your best to continue to learn, because you'll never stop learning.
I have a couple different points to this, but I guess just everyone had amazing points to it. I would say, if you can't land an internship, then continue to keep designing, whether it is building or whether it is designing a shed or a birdhouse or what have you. Try to solve a problem. I'm definitely coming, and I'm taking it from a general stance. Like, think of a common problem that everyone has on an everyday basis. If you can solve that or come up with your design process on how to solve that, it really shows by the time it comes up for your next interview for an opportunity, you can really walk them through your problem solving skills. I have encouraged multiple people at this point to do that and select a problem and try to solve it, regardless of whether the end solution is a built environment or a product, or maybe it's an app. That sort of holistic sort of thinking in terms of making it user-centric is really important, especially in the field of architecture. And then I just wanted to touch on Nicole's point to go after alternative kind of in-between jobs as well. I worked in retail during the holiday season, and I landed a summer internship through that experience. But then I got to spend 4 weeks learning sales and negotiating and, trying to of course I was on commission. So of course I was trying to make a bigger sale. But then through that, I was able to meet an architect who was like, hey, let me leave you my card. Give me a call in the springtime. We'll be reviewing and looking for interns this summer. So you never know where you'll meet your next opportunity. But in the meantime, you might as well learn some new experiences.
Yeah. Awesome. So the next question is, what is a memorable experience you had as an intern? And what's kind of the one thing that you took away from your internship experience?
I had a really amazing internship. Not to brag too much, but it was with HDR in Omaha, Nebraska, and the studio leader, the design director for the firm, is a KU graduate, and he's really considerate to how people develop in their careers. And because of that internship, I applied to Columbia and got a second degree and had that whole crazy, amazing experience. As an intern, they encouraged me and another person who had the same internship, basically, from KU to work on a project together outside of the office. And they set us up with a local arts exhibition hall, basically. And we were able to build a full-scale art installation together with some experts from the firm, and we got to like laser cut parts. This was before 3D printing, because I'm starting to get old. And we installed the whole thing together. We were up on ladders, and we built this amazing thing. It had a really successful opening for the exhibition, and then it was featured in Interior Design magazine. So that was probably the best part of the internship, but the whole thing was incredible.
Awesome. Anyone else have anything to follow that up with? I know that's a pretty amazing experience.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Good, Benny. So I don't really have anything to top that one. One of the coolest experiences that I had, though, was working at Smith Group DC for a summer internship and getting to work on a competition. And it was when Lead 1.0 was out. So dating myself a little bit, but yeah, it was for a multi-use kind of mixed residential design, and it was just really neat to just get to be a part of. And at that time, there was definitely I think an industry shift towards sustainability. So really it was a great learning, I guess, process that was 2 weeks long for the competition, and we ended up not winning anything, but it was a good experience to go through. And then also that summer, we also got to see the unveiling of the National Spy Museum that was in DC. That was unveiled, so that was pretty neat. They did close down that whole city block and kind of did a building wrap, and then they had kind of some people rappelled down from the helicopter, revealing the front of the building. So that was kind of a neat experience.
I don't know if Studio 804 counts as an internship, but I sure felt like it was. But, building an entire house, that was pretty memorable for me, going through the entire process of design to actually building it ourselves, to being in like 20-degree weather with rain and sleet going as you're trying to, frame a house. So, yeah, it was grueling. It was really hard, but I definitely felt like I learned a ton from it, and it made me better than what I do here.
And I'm probably the least qualified to answer this question because I've actually never had a formal internship. So I've had a lot of good mentors out there. So I would just say, once you find that internship, just be hungry to learn and tell them repeatedly, not just on interview day, but a week or two or a month later, like, no, literally, I want to learn everything you know. Like, tell me everything you've got, and these stories that they'll tell you. If you end up with somebody that's in the 55-year-old range, right? They've been doing this for 30 years. The stories they can tell you can save you a lot of pain and struggle. So just keep asking them. Just keep asking whoever you're working for or working with. Hey, tell me about the old days. What were the issues back then? Or the last job was always the worst project I've ever been on, in the construction field at least. So, ask them about their last job and ask everybody you talk to about their last project and what were the issues, and you'll learn a ton just from those trials and tribulations that they already went through. So.
All right. It looks like we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So the next one is going to be, in your experience, either mentoring an intern or having an intern in the office or being an intern, what makes the difference between a good intern and a great intern? So, everyone jump in.
So I feel like being a good intern is being just available and willing and enthusiastic about doing any assignment that you're given, and being fast and being good at it. And a great intern would ask for feedback while they're doing something, I think, so that they don't. Because I've had interns before who, they're really good at what they do. You trust them, you give them a pile of work, they complete it, and then they give it back to me, and everything's wrong. And I feel really bad because they tried really hard and they just didn't know that everything's wrong. So as you're going along, asking questions is really helpful. I might take it for granted that you know all of the ADA restrictions, for example, or I might think that you have more knowledge than you do because you're so confident and you're such a good designer and you're good at all of these things. So I think just checking in regularly and making sure that what you're doing is correct is really good. You have to have a fine balance that you don't annoy the person that you're working with or helping out by asking way too many questions, but like a once a day check-in is probably appropriate.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think a great intern is somebody that comes in that's, again, very enthusiastic, full of energy, assertive, does ask the questions, completes the tasks on time. An even better intern, I think, are the ones that are inquisitive of the other pieces of the architectural industry. We had this one summer intern that was just flat out ask the question if they can be a part of the proposal process because they just wanted to learn how do we chase work and how do we submit a proposal for a potential new project. So that was very well received. It might not happen all the time, but if the opportunity is there, it is a great learning opportunity, and you shouldn't be able to regret not asking the question during your time with the company.
Definitely. The only thing I'd add on to that would just be doing research on your own. The job doesn't stop at 5 o'clock and everything turns off. The great interns are the ones that actually continue that research after work and come back the next morning with, hey, look what I found. This is another way we could do this, or I found another alternative for this design, and that would literally make you shine if you walk in the next day with a couple alternatives, or you worked for 4 or 5 hours in the evening learning Revit or SketchUp or whatever it is on your own. So I know that's probably not in labor laws, but it shows the extra initiative for sure.
Especially if you're paid hourly.
Right, exactly.
There we go. All right, so the final question we have, and this doesn't have to be referenced particularly to your firm, but kind of your opinions as industry professionals. And should we as students be expecting in-person internships in summer 2020, or are you predicting that almost unanimously across the nation it'll continue to be virtual internships? And what are we expecting virtual internships to maybe look like?
So for us, I don't think that we're offering any virtual internships, which is a shame, but there's a feeling among our leadership that we can't properly train people or help them, or there's something to be said about sitting in an office and hearing all of the language around you. And especially if you're working in a really specialized practice, like our pro sports market. So unfortunately, we don't have any of those. We've heard from our leadership that we're not going back until vaccines are widely available. So that might mean like a second half of summer internship. It really all just depends on what that rollout looks like.
I know we're still doing virtual internships and rotational programs. They're definitely fewer than they were before. I think 2021, that summertime period, is definitely going to be a little short on internships in general. So maybe look at some of the technology companies, because almost all of the technology companies have shifted over to fully work from home, and there may be some opportunities there. Or on the field, that's probably the 2 locations. Hopefully we don't have a huge glut of project's kind of getting delayed here from next year, but I think it's pretty much inevitable at this point. So I would say plan accordingly and start branching out a little bit further. I never thought I would get into technology. I was a construction person, thought I wanted to be an architect, ended up just loving construction and stayed there, and then came over to technology because I was the guy on the job site that knew how to email, right? So that's it's kind of a weird path, but there's a lot of available positions right now in technology and good opportunity.
I know at BRR we've been pushing for people to come back into the office, but I know we've been heavily doing a lot of interviews online. Typically, our interview process is we do a phone call, and then we already do a Zoom call with you. You meet with principals and other people, and our final meeting is usually you'll meet in the office, but they've also pushed that final meeting or interview into another phone call. But I know recently we've also been hiring more people and stuff like that. Our workload is still kind of high. So we're doing our best to stay safe as well. There's precautions if you do come into the office, but I know a lot of the office members in the Kansas City office at least have that option to work from home, and a lot of them opt out for that. So me personally, I come into the office because they haven't given me a laptop yet, but there's not very many people here, and we try to stay safe. We keep masks on, social distancing, and all that stuff too. But I know they are looking to expand as well next year as well.
And for us, at this time, we're definitely looking to move forward with a 2021 summer internship program. Typically, we'll really open up the applications in the beginning of the year, and then try to make the selections in early spring or so. Programs about 10 to 12 weeks. In terms of virtual versus hybrid versus in-person, we're going to monitor the situation and make sure that it's the most safe for our employees. The majority of our staff are still working remotely, including myself, and just kind of on an as-needed basis, we do have protocol for being in the office as well. So I guess all I'm saying is that we're adapting to it as we go, and hopefully it continues to improve.
Awesome. Well, great to hear your insight in the industry and kind of to give to students what we should be expecting. But with that, are there any other questions from the students that are present? Give them an opportunity to ask.
If you're a tree, what kind of tree would you be?
All right. With that, then, is there a question?
Yeah, this is a little bit further down the line, but do you have any advice about, or just thoughts about transitioning from an intern to like a young professional at graduation? Like what the differences in the roles and responsibilities, how to do that most effectively? Any advice along those lines?
Sure. For us, we definitely treat our internship or our summer internship as a bridge into emerging professional. Pretty much the role that we call any post-grad full-time employees. So we would want it to be a progression of that. So if we're fortunate enough to have you with us for an internship, and then you're graduating that following year, and you could potentially come on as emerging professional, then that's the ideal situation. For anyone that hasn't interned with us and are just applying to an emerging professional position, then we would kind of treat it as similar, kind of a hybrid to a summer internship. Obviously, you'd be coming in each day, or working with us each day, and we'll try to assess your skills at that point and help you grow as a aspiring designer.
I think it's similar for us. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nicole. Sorry.
But I think the main difference between it's not even really the work that you do that would change. It's that you're a full-time employee. So understanding your benefits and your company's 401k plan or other retirement plan. If you don't understand all of those things as an intern already, it would be really important for you as you're transitioning into a full-time role to sit down with HR and really start to understand what it means. I know a lot of companies do it differently, and if you're getting paid a certain amount to work at one firm, and if you have another offer to work at the other firm, you might end up really in two different places financially when you compare the benefits to each other. And it has a huge impact on your life later on, based on how much you're able to invest or save as a very young professional. And I would encourage you to not be shy about asking those questions at the appropriate time and with the appropriate person, as you're making that transition.
Yes, I can't even stress. Go ahead and ask that all the time. And typically if anyone hasn't, I usually bring it up at some point, just because you definitely want to know about your professional development. The money is definitely really great. Definitely don't, but it's not the only factor that should go into your decision.
That nailed the head on what I was about to say. That's all the stuff I'm trying to figure out right now myself too. So yeah, don't be afraid to walk into the HR office and ask away.
We're not scary people. Just from the standpoint of being a designer now in the HR side, yeah, we're all pretty friendly people and just want y'all to be successful.
Only thing I would add would check on any professional organizations in the area, right? If there's some groups or teams that are meeting in the evening, it's a great opportunity to just kind of broaden your network and dive a little deeper into the whole profession. So that'd probably be the main difference between your internship and actually stepping into the career is now you have the time, hopefully, that you're not inundated with homework, that you can actually go do a few of those meetings and professional development and enjoy it and not feel like you're just postponing homework.
And to the point of homework, study for your exams and take them and pass them as soon as you can, because it doesn't get easier later. It gets a lot harder.
I heard especially the structures, right?
It's gone. Well, is it gone? I think it's gone.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. If we don't have any more questions from the audience, then I think we're good to end this. Give it a few seconds. All right, it looks like no more questions. I want to send a sincere thank you to all of our panelists who showed up. We appreciate you being willing to share your knowledge with us in many folds, and we appreciate the vast variety of experience we have here. But yeah, that ends our Hangout for today, and you all are free to go.